Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, JCI members, distinguished guests, partners, and sustainability advocates joining us from around the world. Welcome to JCI Sustain 360, 48 Hours Race to Sustainability, a global initiative of the 2026 JCI Sustainability Commission. My name is Samuel Nehumba from JCI Zimbabwe, and I have the honor of serving as the 2026 JCI Vice President assigned to Africa and the Middle East. JCI Sustain 360 brings together JCI members and organizations across the world to learn, take meaningful action, and create measurable impact around some of the most important sustainability challenges facing our communities and our planet. As part of this initiative, the 48 Hours Race to Sustainability provides a global platform for experts, practitioners, and young leaders to share knowledge, practice experiences, and ideas that can inspire action within our organizations and communities. Today, we are focusing on the theme, biodiversity protection and ecosystem restoration. Biodiversity is the foundation of healthy ecosystems. It supports the food we eat, the water we depend on, our economies, livelihoods, and the resilience of communities around the world. Yet ecosystems across land and sea continue to face growing pressure from climate change, habitat loss, pollution, and the unsustainable use of natural resources. Protecting what remains is essential. But in many places, protection alone is no longer enough. We must also consider how degraded ecosystems can recover, how nature can be restored, and how communities can become active partners in protecting and sustaining the natural systems on which they depend. Healthy ecosystems are also critical to climate resilience. Forests, wetlands, grasslands, mangroves, coral reefs, and other natural systems can help communities adapt to climate impacts with supporting biodiversity, livelihoods, and long-term well-being. Now, our keynote topic today is therefore, ladies and gentlemen, from protection to restoration, building climate resilient ecosystems. I'll take it again. From protection to restoration, building climate resilient ecosystems. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Belinda Bramley. Belinda is a blue economy consultant focused on securing more effective and inclusive marine protection as the cornerstone of a sustainable blue economy. In 2024, she co-founded the Protected Areas Foundation, a UK charity dedicated to supporting and scaling community-managed marine protected areas for the benefit of nature and people. Belinda is an advisor to Natural Capital Associates and Blue Green Future LLC, and an associate of NLA International, a blue economy consultancy. Prior to consulting, Belinda worked for over 20 years in the charity sector, serving as head of impact for Necton Foundation and CFO for Global Canopy and Earthwatch Europe. She's a chartered accountant with an earlier career in the City of London, leading expert teams, providing finance and treasury support for investment banking activities, and was formerly treasurer of Global Canopy. Belinda, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your knowledge and experience with the JCI Global community. We look forward to learning from your perspectives. The virtual stage is now yours. Ladies and gentlemen, Belinda.
Samuel, thank you very much for that warm introduction to present to you all today. I'm really delighted to be here. And I'm very happy to share a few lessons I have learned on my long and winding journey, which I hope may be of help to you. And I'm just going to share my presentation now. So the title of my talk is slightly adapting your theme. So it's from marine protection to regeneration, building climate resilient communities, ecosystems, and blue economies. And perhaps you can guess from the title that my interest is in integrated approaches which benefit both people and nature. So to introduce myself, I am an independent blue economy consultant, and I work on the enabling conditions for an inclusive and sustainable blue economy and enduring marine protection. And I'll say a bit more about those two things, marine protection and the blue economy, a bit later on. So I'm just going to show some of the work that I've been involved in recently. So in 2021, working with NLA International, a blue economy consultancy, I led a report for World Oceans Day on the blue economy in practice, raising lives and livelihoods. And a lot had been said about the blue economy in theory at the time, and we thought it would be really interesting to look at what countries are doing in practice in different ways to develop a blue economy. In the same year, I was invited by Professor Shruti Tripathi in India to contribute a book chapter to a book that she was proposing on quality of life. And I thought, why not? So I invited a colleague with whom I had worked in Seychelles, Angelique Popenoe, who was chief exec of the Seychelles Climate Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, to co-write a book chapter with me. And we chose to title that chapter Nurturing Resilience and Quality of Life, a Blue Economy Approach. And this was really considering the role of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust in advancing conservation and climate resilience and the blue economy in Seychelles, but bringing a quality of life lens to that work. Then in 2023, I was invited by Fair Seas, which is a coalition of environmental NGOs in Ireland, to provide an expert review of their work that they had commissioned for the Government of Ireland on how to sustainably finance Ireland's marine protected area network. In the same year, it was a huge honour to be invited by James Alex Michel, former president of the Seychelles, to provide an expert review on his second book on the blue economy. And I think that was because his first book, Rethinking the Ocean, on the blue economy, had really inspired me in my own work. And in fact, I had referred to his work in the Blue Economy in Practice publication for NLA International. Then in 2024, I was very happy to be a co-author on an academic paper in Frontiers in Ocean Sustainability. And this paper is titled How Legal Personhood and Markets Can Partner to Help Save the Whale. And this was an interesting idea where we can think about rights of nature, taking legal mechanisms to bring them to bear, recognizing really what Indigenous peoples have always known, that nature has intrinsic rights and we have responsibilities towards nature, and how we take that concept and apply the law, provide rights of nature and legal personhood to the whale, for example, and how that might work in tandem with new nature markets to provide more conservation solutions. And then finally, in last year, I was one of the contributors on a paper from MSP Global and IOC UNESCO on marine spatial planning, and looking at the biodiversity inclusive principles. So how do we make sure that we mainstream marine biodiversity into maritime planning through an embrace a biodiversity inclusive approach through all the sectors, as well as how do we spatially plan our activities. And then in 2024, I co-founded the Protected Areas Foundation. It is a UK NGO, and our mission is to scale effective community-managed protected areas for nature and people. So I hope what these opening slides have perhaps shown you is that I have a very broad interest in solutions. I'm very solutions focused, and I'm interested in practical approaches to the blue economy, consequences for people and their quality of life, financial and legal levers that we can bring to bear for better conservation, but also recognizing the need for integrated planning for our seas, because they are busy sea spaces with fisheries and offshore wind and other forms of renewable energy, shipping, ports, and other maritime activities that are all competing with marine conservation. And I just want to say at this point that this work that I've just shown you has all been done by me in the last 6 years, and I am well into my 6th decade. So there's a lesson I want to share here, which is that life is long, and your best work may be yet to come. I think we often can find ourselves in situations or occupations where we're not feeling like we're doing our best work or the most interesting work, but you might be surprised at how relevant everything you do can be later on in your career journey. So how did I get here? I'm just going to show a short video clip made for the Protected Areas Foundation on the origins of our NGO, which will just set the scene.
This meeting is being recorded.
It's always an afterthought. It's an afterthought in funding in the UK. It's an afterthought in policy and governance in the UK, and it's most of our planet. More than 99% of the living space on our planet is in the ocean by volume, and it's astonishing that we're not doing anything like as much as we should be doing. I trained as an accountant many years ago, and I worked in investment banking for 10 years. And then I came to work in marine conservation, working on land first of all, and then I got into marine. And when I came across the marine world, I was astonished at how far behind we are in not only our understanding, but the way that we look after marine life.
So as a graduate, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I decided to qualify as an accountant. And then banking in 1980s Britain was a growth industry, so that's where I ended up working. But then one day I came across an organisation called Earthwatch, and they were recruiting for a CFO, and I applied for the job, and that then changed the course of my career. And it brought me back to really what I truly cared about, and a much more emotionally rewarding career than the intellectual challenges of investment banking. I also went on to become one of the founding trustees of Global Canopy, which is an NGO that tackles deforestation. And at the time I joined them as a trustee back in the end of the last century, their focus was very much on exploring tropical forest canopies around the world, and the science and the techniques of study. And this is a handbook that they produced at the time, and you can see the original Global Canopy logo, the GCP logo down at the bottom is all about forests and trees. And then today they've grown into one of the foremost organizations that is helping organizations globally to tackle deforestation and their forest footprint. So when I went on to work at the Global Canopy as an employee, as their CFO in about 2010, one of the programs they developed was to help corporates understand their footprint on the forest by reviewing their policies and their practices and whether those were driving deforestation. And now they have an analysis looking at 500 companies that's been running for a dozen years now, looking at how business enterprises are impacting on deforestation. And at the same time, when I was working there in 2010, they produced the first of a long series of books. You'll see in the bottom right, they've produced a number of these now, starting with the Little Red Book on reducing deforestation and forest degradation. And this was a handbook to really guide policymakers through an understanding of the tropical forest landscape and how to reduce emissions. Two lessons I learned when I moved into the not-for-profit world. Firstly, I think the NGO sector is a huge source of innovation. And I think Global Canopy's trajectory over the last 25 years shows how a more nuanced understanding of what's driving deforestation has led them to innovate in response to that. And I think you can learn a lot working within NGOs, whatever your particular role might be. And the second big lesson I took away is that to be successful in conservation, we really have to change our behaviours, and particularly our economic behaviours. I then managed to move into marine conservation, again working for an NGO, a new organisation that happened to set up in Oxford, where I lived. And in 2017, I had the great fortune to visit Seychelles. And that was because Nekton was planning a deep ocean science expedition around the waters of Seychelles, and the information that was gathered would inform the country's marine spatial planning initiatives and its conservation initiatives. And I also learned a lot about the deep ocean and how little we really understand about the deep ocean from Professor Alex Rogers, who was the chief scientist for Nekton at the time. He was also Professor of Conservation Biology at Oxford. And he really opened my eyes to how expensive it is to do deep ocean science, how little of it we can get done, and so therefore how little of the deep ocean has really been mapped or understood in any detail. And the lesson I learned from working in Seychelles was how specific the economics of island nations are. So Seychelles, like other small island developing states, or you could call them large ocean nations, are highly dependent on the ocean for their economy. In Seychelles, the economy is really all about fisheries and tourism. And this obviously makes life difficult when you have pandemics. And it's also very costly for island economies to import a large proportion of their food and energy and so on. So I learned a lot from that time working in Seychelles. And during that time, I was also really happy to transition from being looking after the finances in an organisation to being head of impact. And in my role there, I co-devised a joint grant scheme for Seychellois researchers to participate in the scientific expedition with Angelique Popenoe, who I wrote the book chapter with, who was chief exec of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. And I also managed to set up an Africa Oxford Fellowship for two Seychellois researchers, one of them pictured here, Sheena, who's a good friend of mine now, to come over to Oxford and do a month of study with Oxford deep ocean science researchers. I'm very happy to say that Sheena is now doing her PhD study here in Oxford. So The other thing I learned, apart from the fact that island economies face unique economic challenges, is that conservation really has to be of benefit to local people if it's to work. So when I left Necton, I decided to become a consultant in the blue economy. And the reasons for that were that the significance of the blue economy had been really impressed upon me in my time working in Seychelles and seeing how much it mattered to local people and their welfare and their well-being. And I also really understood how behind we are in marine protection. And when I think about the blue economy, I find this SDG wedding cake really encapsulates the way that I think about it, because it reminds us that it's the natural world, it's the biosphere, so life on land, SDG 15, and life below water, SDG 14, underpin the whole of society. And that really the economy is simply a construct of society, and the way that we choose and choice it is to run an economy matters enormously for the welfare of society and the biosphere. But I think this kind of basic fact is often forgotten by people in business, in policy and others, and unfortunately, our economic models are not taking us in the right direction. So one of the things that you might not realise is that SDG 14 is actually the least funded of the Sustainable Development Goals, despite this being a blue planet that we live on. And I find that still deeply surprising. So it's thought that SDG 14 receives only around 4% of the funding that is actually required, despite the fact that the ocean underpins climate regulation, food security, livelihoods, biodiversity, and the majority of global trade passes by sea. And that underinvestment today means that we will have higher economic costs into the future and lost opportunities the longer we delay investing in SDG 14. And that if we close the investment gap for the ocean, then we can rebuild fisheries and secure food for millions, if not billions. We can really boost climate resilience and protect our coastlines. We can conserve biodiversity and ocean ecosystems for future generations. And we can create really key jobs and sustainable blue economies in our coastal communities. So I just want to emphasize the importance of the ocean in the global carbon cycle. So this graphic comes from the Global Carbon Budget, Global Carbon Project. And what it's showing is that on the left-hand side, you have significant quantities of CO2 being emitted into the atmosphere from the burning of gas and oil and coal reserves, and a smaller level of emissions from land use change. But the two sinks that are counteracting those emissions are the land sinks and the ocean sinks. And then the residual balance, the difference between the sinks and the sources, is what's being left in our atmosphere. It's atmospheric CO2. And what this shows, the green arrow here, is that the land sinks are accounting for between 6 and 10 gigatons of CO2 per year. But the ocean sinks in the red circle there are contributing between 10 and 13 gigatons of CO2 per year. So the way this happens is in two forms. So firstly, inorganic carbon is dissolved when through seawater. So the carbon meets the seawater, the atmosphere meets the seawater, and the seawater dissolves inorganic carbon. But the greater part of the way that the ocean regulates climate is that organic carbon is sequestered, and it is sequestered by marine plankton, which are the top of the food web, which between them sequester about 4 Amazon forests worth of CO2 per year. And then that is then fed on by different organisms, and you have a whole marine life food web that is sequestering the carbon and then storing it into the deep ocean. So the reason that I think there's a vast and often not understood regeneration opportunity for our ocean here is that humans have fundamentally changed the marine life pyramid. So that image on the right-hand side shows that we've basically removed 90% of the ocean giants since the 1800s. And over a third of wild fish stocks are overfished. So basically, you can imagine that we've emptied a huge amount from our oceans through industrial scale overfishing. And what that means is that we've reduced the ocean's productivity, its biological productivity, its marine abundance and biomass. And so we've also impaired its carbon cycling capability. But if we reverse that and we restore ocean health and we stop overfishing and we have more effective marine protection, then marine life can recover. And so therefore we can make the ocean more resilient, and we can have more fish in the future if we choose to stop fishing the way that we do in harmful and destructive ways. So I mentioned that in 2021, I was the lead author on the Blue Economy in Practice for LNLA International. And I thought it was helpful just to share how we defined the blue economy at the time, because various definitions had been put forward. But we defined it as an approach that to the ocean and its resources that is both ecologically regenerative, so going beyond just sustainability to actually regenerating ocean life, and socially just, accounting for the needs of current and future generations. It should include all sectors of society in planning for ocean activities and balance the needs of different constituencies to equitably share in the benefits of the ocean, which is a global commons. A blue economy approach recognises ocean climate interactions. It anticipates and plans for the effects of climate change on coastal and marine resources, and conserves or regenerates these natural resources to increase resilience. And in that report, we set out some high-level blue economy steps and principles that we identified were effectively in action in different ways when we looked at what different countries were doing. And in describing these steps and these principles, we first turned to donut economics. So this graphic on the left here shows a blue donut. And donut economics, which was pioneered by Kate Rayworth here in the UK, suggests that we should be aiming for our economy to exist within a sweet spot, which is within the ecological ceiling of the planetary boundaries. So it suggests that we have to live within our means, that the ocean and other ecosystems have a carrying capacity that we cannot and should not exceed. But it also recognises there's a social foundation, that there's a bare minimum that all people on Earth should have access to be able to prosper. So not just energy, water, food and health, but political voice and gender equality and decent work. So that was our foundation for thinking about the principles on the right-hand side here of a regenerative blue economy, the raise principles in the inner ring of the donut at the top. So we suggest that a blue economy should be regenerative in conserving and restoring the vitality of the ocean. It should be adaptive to climate change, to new knowledge and new ways of working. It should be inclusive, particularly of those who depend the most on marine resources, small-scale fishers, for example. It should be sustainable not only environmentally, but socially and economically. And it should be evidence-led based on a holistic range of knowledge, traditional knowledge, as well as scientific knowledge and data sources. And these 5 steps on the outer ring of the donut, we suggest countries can benefit from measuring ocean wealth, and I'll talk about that in a moment, assessing ocean risks, creating holistic governance processes which are inclusive, then developing a blue economy plan and actioning the plan. And then you continue in this spiral. So you're constantly looking at whether your ocean wealth over time is increasing or staying the same, or is it decreasing? This graphic comes from a very nice paper that came out in 2020. And it basically said that we have to stop only looking at GDP as an indicator of progress, and that actually we need to be looking at the means of production. So what are our resources, our natural resources? How are they looking? What are our human and social resources for producing goods and services from the ocean? Are they being managed? Are they at sustainable levels, or are they being overused? And then the ends is the income product of the ocean accounts, and it looks at what is our income and who's benefiting, and is that fair? And the authors suggest that what world leaders should be doing is looking at all 3 indicators, in other words, their ocean wealth and the distribution of income, and as well as GDP, in understanding whether the ocean economy is sustainable. So this is a graphic that just explains how ocean accounts are now being developed to inform sustainable development. And on the left-hand side there, you see environmental assets. So it's basically recognizing that we have assets, natural assets, but also human and social assets that inform our blue economy, that provide flows of benefits to the economy, and those are contributing to national wealth. Unfortunately, the economy also delivers flows back to the environment, often in the case of waste or in emissions. But examples of environmental natural assets could include coral reefs, which prevent flooding, reduce risk of flooding, as well as providing tourism and fisheries benefits, mangroves that provide similar kinds of benefits, seagrass meadows and kelp forests. We have fish stocks, and we have non-living environmental assets in the ocean, such as minerals. And these assets are providing a wide range of goods and services, so food and materials. Now, these will be well recognized in the exploitative version of the economy, but what the economy needs to recognize is that coastal protection and carbon sequestration and storage and erosion control and improved water quality are the regulating services of the ocean, are also providing important critical economic benefits. And therefore, we have to be able to balance how resources are being used in order to see a balance in the benefits that environmental assets bring to us. And importantly, they are very important for our recreation and our well-being. So, ocean accounts can also be really helpful for guiding effective public policy. So the UK is one of several countries that prepares ocean accounts now. And a couple of years ago, it was reported from those ocean accounts that the seabed here in the UK is more valuable for the environment through climate protection and carbon storage than it is for oil. And we have oil and gas operations here in the UK. So ocean accounts can bring hidden values to light, these regulating services that the ocean invisibly provides that are not accounted for in traditional economic models. They can therefore support alignment of public finances to support regenerative and inclusive activities instead of overexploiting resources. And they're also a means of tracking pollution and then ensuring that penalties are put in place and pollution can be ended. So the lesson I've learned from realizing that ocean accounts are being prepared in countries as diverse as Canada and Australia and the UK and Indonesia is that the accounts experience that I had is actually quite valuable. And whilst I might not be using it very much anymore, that understanding that an accountancy training provides you is that it's not just about income, it's about your balance sheet and your assets and your capital, and are you looking after that capital now and into the future? And this particularly matters for our marine environment and our terrestrial environment. We need to manage these precious capitals so that they continue to provide benefits forever if we look after them carefully. So I just want to talk also about progress on marine conservation, because it was reported in April of this year. Good news, you might think, that the world has reached a milestone for nature. 10% of the ocean is now officially protected. And you may be aware that there is a 30 by 30 target for all countries that have signed up to the Global Biodiversity Framework. And target 3 of that framework is about countries ensuring and enabling that by 2030, at least 30% of terrestrial and inland water areas and marine and coastal areas, especially areas of particular importance for biodiversity and ecosystem functions, are effectively conserved and managed, while recognising and respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities, including over their traditional territories. But when we look at that 10% headline in a bit more detail, what we actually see on the right-hand side is that of the 10%, 8.7% of ocean is in areas that are designated as marine protected areas, but they're not reported as having been assessed. And only 1.3% of the global ocean is in designated protected areas where management has been effectively assessed and reported. So how much of the ocean are we actually protecting effectively? And I think the answer is it's a very small amount. So I want to just end with a short film in a moment, but before that, I just want to share some of the lessons I've learned along my journey. Conservation is about behaviour change, but effective marine conservation, I've learned, is really community powered. And conservation has to work for local people socially and economically. It can't be simply at the expense of people's jobs or social welfare. And so it has to be inclusive of everybody's needs. And ocean accounts can really help improve political and business ocean literacy, because they basically talk the language of policymakers and businesses. They allow anybody to understand in financial terms what the ocean is doing for us beyond providing fish. And ocean accounts can really help to guide more sustainable ocean policy and more sustainable marine planning. So I'm going to end with a film. I hope it shows how our work in the UK is really trying to bring an integrated approach. We're bringing government and community and other stakeholders together to imagine a new blue prosperity that is built on effective and inclusive marine protection.
This meeting is being recorded.
It's great to see so many people here. Our community groups here today are doing great work to support these MPAs. We know there's much more progress still to be made for them to be fully effective.
Nobody knows what's under the water. This is the thing with the marine environment. It's a very difficult area to communicate about why it's important.
Stakeholder engagement, we're trying to get people aware of what's going on, involved in it.
Frankly, it feels like we've been doing the consultants' work for them, unpaid, as volunteers. That's not sustainable.
Community 30 by 30 is about putting Scotland's coastal communities at the heart of MPA management.
So around Scotland, we at the Protected Areas Foundation have already identified more than 30 community groups carrying out some level of what we've called active management.
So what we're asking you to do today is to imagine what we could achieve in Scottish MPAs if we invested properly in bottom-up pathways for action, starting with people and place, properly valuing, supporting and providing resources to people like the ones in the room today. So at the Protected Areas Foundation, we're just starting to work with the communities to co-design a framework for what community-led active and adaptive management could look like. And we'd invite you all to collaborate on that with us. It's tantalisingly possible for our MPAs to deliver real social, environmental and economic wealth. But that'll only happen if they're actually managed actively towards that vision.
Thank you very, very much, Belinda, for that insightful and inspiring keynote presentation. Your perspectives have reminded us that biodiversity protection is not only about preserving nature as it exists today, it is also about restoring what has been degraded, strengthening ecosystems, and creating the conditions for both nature and communities to thrive. Today's keynote has highlighted an important shift in how we think about biodiversity. Protection remains essential, but the scale of the challenge also requires restoration. Healthy ecosystems provide far more than environmental value. They support livelihoods, strengthen climate resilience, sustain economies, and help maintain the natural system on which communities depend. We have also been reminded that successful conservation cannot happen in isolation. It requires knowledge, effective management, strong partnerships, and the meaningful participation for communities. Whether we are protecting our oceans and coastal areas, restoring forests and wetlands, or strengthening ecosystems within our own communities, every action contributes to a larger global effort. For JCI members and young leaders, this creates an important opportunity. We can increase awareness of biodiversity within our communities. We can support ecosystem protection and restoration initiatives. We can build partnerships with experts, governments, businesses, and civil society organizations. And most importantly, we can help ensure that local communities are part of both the decisions and the solutions. On behalf of Junior Chamber International and the 2026 JCI Sustainability Commission, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to Belinda Bramley for sharing her expertise, experience, and passion for nature with the JCI global community. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to everyone joining us live and those who will watch this session later. We hope today's keynote inspires you to move beyond awareness towards action, and from protecting nature towards restoring the ecosystems on which our shared future depends. Thank you all for being part of JCI Sustain 360 48 Hours Race to Sustainability. I'm Samuel Nehumba from JCI Zimbabwe. Until our next session, let us lead, connect, and evolve for a sustainable future. Thank you.